usually happens is you have a manager, and he has to get physical paper, and he's looking at hiring this candidate, and he's got to get this physical piece of paper before he hires the person, and she's got to fill it out in this case. Then she's got to get it back to the manager, and the manager usually has weekly or monthly HR paperwork that's got to go over to corporate, and corporate then has to process this paperwork, and they got to submit it over to a WOTC provider that then has to fill out their own paperwork on top of it and get it in, as long as there's no questions, over to the state workforce agency. And by the way, Kendra, they have to do this entire process
in 28 days.
Now, Kendra, what happens if they do it in 29 days?
There's no credit.
What happens if they do it in 35 days?
There is no credit.
Okay.
They don't care.
So it doesn't matter. If you don't get this done in 28 days, you're not getting your tax credit at all. Doesn't matter if the person qualified or not, you're not getting. So let's look at the differences here, or some of the difficulties I meant to say. And so when you have this manager, again, first they have to submit this documentation before they hire. So they bring someone in on the first day of work and they hire someone, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And this can be difficult for a potential hire to want to complete this paperwork, right?
Well, yeah, then you move on to some other issues like employee truthfulness. So these questions, are kind of a little bit invasive.
Yeah,
they could be.
And sometimes a potential employee doesn't want to reveal some of these things about themselves to a potential employer. Not that they're bad, but you don't know them yet. You don't know if it's going to have an impact on you receiving the job or not.
The other one is employee knowledgeability. These questions, because it's a stock form that, the IRS probably spent millions developing, it's done in all of their high-quality question asking ability.
Skip to this section.
Yeah, and it's really confusing, and so then you get into by the time the employee is done reading the these and the thous and the shells and everything else, do they even understand what the question is asking?
Right. Some of these questions, Ryan, aren't even based on the employee themselves, but people within their household.
Yeah.
And sometimes they simply don't know.
And so you look through that, and then you have the issue that now the manager's got to get a timely submission from the employee, and they have to get a timely submission over the HR manager, whoever does this. And so it's kind of making it through all of this process in
28 days.
And so that's if there's no questions. Kendra, often maybe the processor gets this, and they're looking, and they're saying, well, wait a minute, we have a question on this. Guess what they have to do? They have to send the physical piece of paper back. Okay, the same one that the employee. They can't fax it. They can't email it. They have to send the physical piece of paper back to the HR manager, who has to get it back to the manager, has to get it back to the employee, who has to then get it back to the manager, back to the HR manager. Same physical. Can't scan it, can't email it, can't phototype it, can't transport it, can't anything else. Has to be the same physical piece of paper that they originally filled out. And it all has to take place within the same 28-day period.
No matter if there's questions or not.
And so what you get is when these providers have questions, they often just throw the application in the trash, so to speak, because they know they're already up against the deadline and it's not going to get through. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So now you look at our process. In our process, the manager simply enters the interviewee into the system. So they just say, hey, I just want to hire this person, which means they don't have to print any paperwork and send it over. They just say, hey, I'm looking at hiring Mary, and Mary would then get a message on her own mobile device, on her own computer, and she would go in. Here's the great part, Kendra. Because when she's working with this, she's not working directly with our company. That means that she doesn't have to submit it back to the manager. It means the manager doesn't need to submit it to HR. It means HR doesn't have to process it. It doesn't have to be submitted. And this is how we're able to go in and achieve this 28-day process. But there's something even more powerful than that we're able to do. And that is that, remember those two things we talked about, Kendra?
Right.
Employee truthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how we handle that. So imagine you're getting, you're applying for a job, and you get this application that's asking these questions, and one of the things is employee truthfulness. We handle this in two ways. One, we communicate directly with the employee, and we say, the information that you provide us will not be shared with your employer. Kendra, this is the biggest area of feedback we've received from both employers and employees that they absolutely love, because they're not putting their employees in a difficult position, and the employee knows, hey, I can answer truthfully on this.
Without feeling like it's going to encumber them to receive the job in any way.
Absolutely. So, and then if that doesn't work, then we have this thing that we have them sign that says, under penalty of perjury, you're responsible to answer this honestly. And we cite the section, of the code that requires them to do so. And so then you've got the other side, Kendra, of employee knowledgeability. And we handle this in a few different ways. The first is we ask really simple questions.
Right.
We understand that as you see these questions appear on your smartphone and they're asked in a clear way that makes sense to you, you're able to answer them more honestly than when you're fumbling through a federal form that's, almost like it's meant to be confusing. And if that's not good enough, we go check national databases in real time to go check. And when they answer negative to something, we go check these national databases in real time, and we come back and say, hey, actually we do see someone at your address is,
receiving certain benefits. Are you sure?
Are you sure?
And it allows them the opportunity to rethink the question and answer it differently if needed.
Yeah. So these databases are out there. They're available to employers, but people just don't go do that. And when you're dealing with a paper form or even a submission form in from your, Paychex or ADP or something like that, that's just a one-way submission. It's not going out there and doing this process. So we've been able to alleviate all of that and allow the employee the comfort of being able to answer these questions honestly and to understand the questions. Then what we do is electronically we fill out all of those forms and we submit them into the state. And here's the great part. If we have a question, we can come back and ask the employee in real time on their smart device, on their smartphone or on their computer for that update. And because their original submission was electronic, Kendra, we're allowed to work with them electronically.
Exactly. The amount and time that streamlines this process is crazy. When we first began to kind of unfold and see what the process really was years ago, there's so many failure points, Ryan.
Absolutely.
And we're able to eliminate almost every single one of them with this simple, easy, direct form of communication directly with the candidate.
Absolutely. So looking at those two processes side by side, you can really clearly understand why we're able to meet this 28-day threshold, why we're able to push so many more people through. And Kendra, that was really on a one-off basis. That's
right.
One candidate. Let's talk about this on a corporate level. When your clients come in and they sign up on your .me page, I want you to understand the first thing they do is they go build out their locations. Mm-hmm. And so as they're building out their locations, you remember, they're not just hiring for one person. They might be hiring one office manager, 2 administrative staff. This is a car dealership example, 5 service techs, maybe 1 web developer, 1 logistics engineer. And Kendra, the other thing for people to understand is when you go hire 1 office manager, we know, because we have this system that tracks everything, that people tend to candidate 10 or more.
Right. It's an average. It's a national average, Ryan. And it's interesting to look at. We do a lot of hiring here, and this is almost exactly our average as well. 10 to 1 real candidates. I could get, 100 resumes. But you're talking about people that could potentially actually fill the position.
Yep. So let's talk about how companies go about WOTC. The number one WOTC methodology, okay, so I want you to imagine you're out there, you're working with a car dealership, a restaurant. The number one way that they probably take WOTC right now is that they don't take it at all. This is the most common methodology. They go out there, they look at their 10 qualified people, and they hire this one person, and that's the end of that.
Exactly.
The second most common, when you ask someone, are you taking WOTC, what they're most likely doing is what I've referred to on previous calls as the WOTC lottery. And that is that I've got my 10 candidates, and I go through and I select this one, and I say, great, can you start on Monday? And then they start on Monday, and they fill out this paperwork, mm-hmm. and then I submit it into the state, and I wait 30, 60, 90 days to hear back on whether or not it would be a good candidate. I mean, the employee might not even work there anymore.
Ding, ding, ding.
At that point. Oh,
nope.
no credit for you.
Right.
So that's called the WOTC lottery. And if people are taking WOTC, most likely that's what they're doing. So they're doing the WOTC lottery. The third category is our system. And Kendra, I call this educated decision. And the way educated decision works is really simple. You've got 10 candidates. You screened all 10 of them. And then you know which ones potentially qualify for a tax credit. From there, you may decide to hire one of the people that pre-qualify, or you may decide to hire someone that doesn't.
Right.
That's your choice. But Kendra, what you end up with is that if somebody's hiring 2 admin staff, that's 20 serious candidates. You're hiring 5 service techs, that's 50 serious candidates. And what happens is, for those service techs, Kendra, if people are able to look and they're able to make an educated decision, sometimes they're going to hire people with the credit,
right,
and sometimes they're not. That's okay. They can still hire whoever they want. But the difference is, instead of leaving it to the WOTC lottery or chance, they get to be in control of how many people they're going to hire.
An educated decision impacts their business as a whole. This is turning